Well, hey, Pastor Joshua, how are you doing today?
Hello, Sean. I'm good. How are you, brother?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you so much. Pastor, I am so excited to have you on the podcast today because, well, for a couple of reasons. Number one, the incredible work that you're doing in Romania as a whole, running your church, which I'll have you talk about here in just a moment, but also taking care of the community through the clinic. Um, Working with partner churches. You have your hands in so many things, and now, uh, having to not really having getting the opportunity to share and love on your Ukrainian neighbors as they are seeking refuge and help. Um, I'm so excited to talk with you, and of course, I'm a little biased because I have been there to your church a couple of times. I've had the opportunity to be out of ministry with you. I've seen you. I've preached firsthand, so I'm a little biased. I'm not going to lie, but I've been looking forward to this one. So thank you so much for taking the time today to jump on here. So why don't we start? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your church and how you got started in ministry?
Yeah, well, hello, I'm Iosua Faur, married with Christiana. We have three wonderful kids. I grew up in a Christian family. Actually, I'm a PK, okay, pastor's kid. And the last thing I wanted to be was a pastor. But by God's grace, my heart and my desires changed in high school. So I went to Baptist Theological Seminary in Bucharest. That's when I met Christiana. Got married when I was a senior, and in the same year moved to Brăila, which was 8 hours from my hometown. Holy Trinity Baptist Church in Brăila have a medical clinic, Diaconia, which was started in a partnership with Serving Him. So back then, almost 10 years ago, they were looking for a chaplain. And I decided to go into the ministry not as a pastor first, but as a chaplain, having the chance to grow in evangelism and counseling. So that's how I came to Brăila. That's how I became a part of Holy Trinity Baptist Church here. But after 1 year and a half, Holy Trinity invited me to join the pastoral team. So I left the clinic, but we were still close to the Iconia ministry and everything that was happening there. Holy Trinity Baptist Church is a 102 years old church, so a lot of
Wow.
history behind. But I got the privilege to serve an amazing community here. Back then, I was directing the youth ministry, but after 3 years in ministry, there were some changes in the pastoral team, and I was invited to be the senior pastor when I was 28 years old. Didn't see that
Wow.
coming. Not sure if I wanted it, but it was God's will. So we continued a lot of projects, especially in village ministry, planting churches, growing up churches that were dying, and we did that with Serving Him. So Serving Him was not involved only in health ministry, but also in church planting here in Romania and training the pastors, training the future leaders. And also we work with RAM. RAM is a Romanian American mission, uh, an organization that it's in a good partnership with Serving Him in America, and in a long partnership with the Romanian churches here in this part of the country. So we work together, continue all these projects. We also, as a church, supported and being part of the construction of a micro hospital with Serving Him, an extension of Diaconia. But not long after this major change, with an awesome team of leaders, we had the task to lead the church through uh, COVID pandemic for 2 years, and then when we thought that everything is finished and we go back to normal, uh, the war started. So we had to take the church through a refugee crisis. So but
That
just only the through the pandemic, we had over 30 funerals in our local church.
wow.
So these are things for which I wasn't trained in seminary. But
Yeah.
we tasted from God's goodness and grace toward us, and this is where we are right now. And we try to serve God and love people as much as we can and as best as we know how to do that in these special times.
That's an amazing story right in itself, and I want to address something you said there. This is not something you learn in seminary,
Yeah.
and I find oftentimes as a leader, uh, no amount of training can prepare you for every situation, and I think that's it's interesting because I think that's how God works.
Mhm.
If we knew everything, then what role would God have in our life,
Exactly.
but we are put in situations where we have to draw close to him, and we have to trust him and know that he's on our side, and he has prepared us even though we didn't realize we were prepared for such a time as in this case this, because who would have imagined a global pandemic and now a war very close to your borders. um, Let's talk a little bit about that war, or not that, because it's still very much happening right now.
Mhm.
A lot of people are still, unfortunately, dying. A lot of people are still displaced. There are still people who, without um, the basic necessities, um, both inside Ukraine and those who have gone abroad, and they're looking for kind of their next home. When did you guys realize that something might happen, and what's kind of going through your mind as a Romanian? Before this would be before the war actually began. What was going through your mind as you saw Russia starting to move troops towards the border?
Yeah, well, Sean, I have to confess and to tell you that I wasn't a believer that things will go this way. So we saw the Russian troops at the Ukrainian border in January, March, January through March. We knew what happened in Crimea a few years ago,
Mhm.
but I don't know how to tell you this in a nice way, but I didn't think that Putin is so crazy that he will start a war. Um, there were some
Yeah.
voices in Romania that said that this will happen, but we just came out the pandemic, and in the during the pandemic, you heard all these crazy stories with all these backup plans and evil people who wants to control the world. So they were trying to create a lot of panic. So when this rumor came in Romania, most of us didn't buy that. We didn't thought that
Hmm.
this will happen. Personally, I love history. I'm a nerd. So I thought that we learned our lessons after 80 years of from the last war, from the Second World War. I thought that although the war is a reality all over the world, so we cannot close our eyes and say this is unique in the last years. No, wars were all over the world, but uh, I didn't thought that this will happen again in Europe, especially in a
Hmm.
civilized Europe, and a Europe that touched a level of civilization. So
Right.
in February 24, when the first missiles were launched into Ukraine from Russia, I couldn't believe my eyes.
Hmm.
Seeing the refugees at our border uh, brought to life so many stories that I heard from my grandparents, about war,
Hmm.
about Nazis, about Russia, and so on. So, of course, it was not the first refugee crisis in the last years, because you had the Syrian refugee crisis, and that touched a little bit of Europe. Uh, but this was at our border, so it
Yeah.
really, it was really hot for us, and especially for my generation, especially for millennials. And yeah,
Right.
it was something out of the history books. We didn't thought that this will be a story for our grand nephews, yeah, for our nephews and the future generation here in Romania. But yeah, it started, and as the weeks and the days passed, it was more real for us.
Right. Some of these stories, obviously, that we've seen in our media here, and that our our network of pastors across Eastern Europe have shared, have been heartbreaking. I'm going to ask you to share about those in just a moment. But one of the things that impacts me the most are the children. I mean, you have children. I have a child. Um, these are things you never think you're going to ever have to talk to your child about or explain war, and you hope you never have to, right? Um, and it's so hard for me to process how you would talk to a child. We have a podcast coming out tomorrow with a young single mom who uh, her she's up in Poland by herself with her 9-year old son,
Hmm.
and she started to tear up as she thought about his future, and those are things those are kind of intangibles that are hard to grasp. It's hard to think through those things, and so um, and I would agree. What we saw and what I've heard is the same thing that you said. A lot of people thought it was just going to be a threat. It's Putin being Putin. It's not going to happen. As one person said, these were our brothers and sisters at one point in history.
Yeah.
These are we have family there, and who puts brother against brother?
Mhm.
And
And
and so
especially, sorry, especially between two Christian countries, because although we know that the reality is not at the basic level, because you have nominal Christians, but these
right,
are formal Christian countries, so they have Christian values at the core of their society. And and I'm not going there. You know that the Orthodox Christian Church in Russia had its support of this war, and yeah, seeing all of this, it's absolutely crazy. And some there are these are things that we didn't expect and didn't thought that will happen during our lifetime now.
it's interesting that you say that because I was talking to another pastor and he mentioned the same thing. To have a church support war, and he said that that was one of the things that was a very difficult thing for him to swallow as a church leader, as a pastor himself,
Mhm. Mhm.
to see regardless, in this case, the Orthodox Church support Putin and support the attacks. He said it was challenging. He said, he had to have some one-on-ones with God on that one about, you know,
Yeah.
uh, why is this happening? So, uh, I think you raise a great point there. Um, I don't think anyone, really saw this happening. Um, Let me ask you this question. So, obviously, the 24th, the bombs started falling. People started fleeing. Of course, they had to, really had no choice but to flee, kind of west, hitting, Poland, Romania, Moldova, and then basically that was kind of their checkpoint, and then from there they could at least in Poland and Romania, because of the political alliances, they were a little safer once they crossed that border, you know. Um, and then they had a second to breathe out and say, okay, where do we go from here? What's next for us?
Yeah.
Um, what are some of the stories that stand out to you as you had that initial wave of guests coming in from Ukraine, that you were just like, I can't. You heard it and you're just like, I can't believe this.
Well, as I told you, we weren't prepared for what was coming. I remember that weekend when the war started. I was watching the news all day long, and it took me some time to realize that not only Romania is at the border with the country that was invaded, but we were in Brăila, which was 1 hour from the Ukrainian and Moldovan border. So we didn't know how should we react. We didn't know what will be the needs of the refugees, what we can do, what we can offer. But I remember that Saturday evening, we had a meeting with our team, and we decided that whatever will happen, our church building and the clinic will become a shelter for the refugees. So the first refugees that came to Brăila to our church were a couple with a 10-year girl. They stayed in line at the border for more than 24 hours and wanted to get to the Czech Republic. So they just wanted to take a shower, eat something, and have the tank full with fuel. So they arrived at the. It was Sunday morning. They arrived during the morning service. I was making the announcements when they called me, and it was the first time when I had my phone with me in the front of the church, because I knew these people are coming, and I told them, I tell the church, if the phone is ringing, I will stop whatever we do and I have to answer, because this is happening right now. So they called me during the announcements. I stopped. I invited the worship team to sing a song, and with a couple of brothers and sisters, we went out to meet them, to greet them, and see what are their needs. So this is how it started. After just few hours, close to midnight, we had a lot of cars, buses from Ukraine, from other churches in Romania that brought refugees, especially mothers with their kids. It was February, and Monday started to snow in Romania, and it started to snow in Ukraine. Uh, and we heard that there are long lines, miles of long lines at the border, and there were mothers with kids in the snow, without any car, without any shelter, just waiting to pass the border. So um, for us just hearing that, and we couldn't do anything because the authorities at the border didn't know how to process all of this, so you couldn't go in Ukraine and take them. You just have to wait them at the border. Yeah, so this hit us emotionally, financially, in every aspect, hit us very very hard. uh, we had to take care of them suddenly, a lot of people, very vulnerable, very fragile, and it was like this, like that for many weeks, day and night, day and night.
I just can't, I can't imagine, you know, that cycle of people coming through. And um, one of the things that we do here, I know that you have provided a number of photos for us to put up on our social media pages, and I take the time to blur faces
Mhm.
for the safety of obviously the guests, and for the safety of your staff.
Of course.
Um, and I made a post, social media post a few weeks back, and I said it's one of the most difficult things to do, because when you blur a face, you're almost blurring some of the humanity um, of what these folks have gone through.
Hmm.
The eyes are the window to the soul, as they say.
Yeah.
And so, I just, some of those photos are haunting to me, of these families, especially the young children, or young parents, young families, where they just literally look shell shocked,
Mhm.
um, having really no idea what just happened. it's hard to to fathom that. Um, Pastor, let me ask you this. So, how did you quickly equip your church to uh, become really a refugee center, emergency refugee center? What steps did you guys take? Um, I mean, you're putting on a pastor hat on Sunday, and then you're putting on a humanitarian relief hat the rest of the week, while still trying to juggle all the other responsibilities that come with being a pastor. So, how did you prepare your congregation for that?
So let me take you to the uh, backstage process that happened here. Uh, so as I told you, it was a surprise for us, everything that happened. But it also was a surprise for us to see how well the Romanian authorities, like in Moldova and in Poland, organized themselves and helped the refugees. It was exemplary. Um, so seeing that the basic needs are covered by the authorities in the country at the border, we decided as a local church to go deeper, to help and cover the spiritual needs and the psychological needs, the soul needs of them, and to help them not with just with the transportation from Romania to another country, but also with counseling. So that's why we decided as a local church. So this was our own strategy. We decided that we didn't take a large group of refugees. We only took here a realistic number that we could help them in that way. Of course, we helped a lot of other refugees that only transit Brăila and uh, went for a few hours in our church. Were here and help with all their needs. But we took a smaller group, and when they arrived here, we just let them rest for a few hours after taking their data, finding out their destination if they have one destination, and next day. Beyond free food, free accommodation, free fuel, tickets, or whatever they need to continue their journey, we got to know them. So this was the training for our staff. It wasn't time for something formal, you know. We just said, go and talk with them, go and be with them, and we will learn what we have to do. So talking with all these people, we didn't call them refugees, we called them guests. So every time they came here, we just tried to say, welcome here, you are our guests for, I don't know, a few days, a few weeks maybe. So you are in our home, you are not in a shelter, you are in our home, and we just trying to get some peace in their mind, you know. So we observed that all of them are going through some common conditions. So it was denying, it was distortion, it was resignation, and some of them were in despair, you know. Most of them believed that in 2 or 3 days they will be back home. So we had people coming here on Wednesday, and we asked them, so how long do you need to stay, where do you want to go? And most of them said, well, just give us 2 or 3 days and we will return, because the war will end till Saturday. In weekend,
So they
everything.
thought that the war was literally going to come to an end in 2 or 3 days, and they were
Yeah,
going to be able to just return back to Ukraine.
yeah. And asking the first time, I thought that they have informations that I don't have, or the news, the media are not releasing them. But their expectations wasn't based on anything that was real, you know. So the shock for them was so hard, was so big, was so intense, because they break their minds out of reality, you know. So just this was the common condition for most of them. So um, uh, we had to be with them when those 2 3 days passed and the war wasn't ended, you know. So we had to help them. We had to counsel them. We had to listen to them. We had to cry with them, to hug them. For most of them, we had to make a plan for a new life. They couldn't realize that, because 2 days ago they were living their life just as you and me are living our lives, and now all of the sudden their home is destroyed. All their dreams, all their plans for the kids, college, weddings, all of that is gone now. So you had to get to know them so that you could help them, guide them to a job, to a new house, to another country, close to their siblings, help with documentations, and of course all of that is time, energy, money, and all of that, a lot of resources. And uh, we did that like we did it for our own people. It wasn't Ukrainians, it wasn't Moldovians, it wasn't Romanians. It was just human beings, trying to help. And uh, uh, some of them said, "Well, I don't know what will happen, but I'm very afraid that Romania will be involved in the war." So that wasn't very comfortable for us, because at first you didn't thought that the war will start in Ukraine. So what will stop Putin go to Moldova and go to Romania? Even if we if even the if the conditions of those countries are different. But yeah, during those times when you are very tired, you go through a lot of states. So yeah, we had to learn how to help them, just help them in the process of helping them, and of course we did all of this with the goal of covering the most fundamental need, uh, their salvation. So sharing the gospel was our goal every time. And Sean, that wasn't hard, because when you show them love, when people who don't know you from another country are feeding you, giving you a bed to sleep, are crying with you, are spending time with your kids so that you can sleep a few hours. The heart is really open for the gospel, and God's Spirit worked in wonderful ways in these times.
That is absolutely beautiful, and to hear that, and it's I know I've said this on the podcast before, but I said, um, it's hard to minister the gospel to someone when they're on an empty stomach. But if you can provide the basic needs, and sometimes that's rest, sometimes that's caring, showing love to their kids, that's a hot meal, whatever that is, I believe that the Lord can use that to open the door, and creates a heart that's ready to receive, and to hear His voice through the local church. Um, so very, very powerful. One thing that has really surprised me, and I wanted to get your perspective here on this, especially being part of RAM, that you are. One of the things that I don't know why it surprised me, but it did, was seeing all of the churches, all of the evangelical churches, all of the nonprofits come together so quickly. And I don't know how it is there in Romania, but sometimes here in the U.S., it's kind of like, well, we do our thing, you do your thing. We help these people, you help those people. And I don't want to say it's competitive or it's, but it's not. It takes a lot for nonprofits and ministries to come together. But it was amazing because it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, the churches, regardless of who they were, where they were at, the nonprofits, regardless of what they typically did, rushed to provide aid. Um, did you see that same thing?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's beyond the evangelical circle. You had the opportunity, the unique opportunity to work shoulder by shoulder with Orthodox priests and Catholic priests, and coming together in this, because uh, after a few days. you realize that this crisis is beyond your resources, is beyond of what you can do, and you in order to help. So, for example, we for every refugee that came here in Brăila, if they wanted to go to Germany, to Italy, to I don't know where in Europe, uh, we maybe we could have helped them with some money to buy a plane ticket or a bus ticket or something like that. But we didn't have connections all over the Europe. But I knew a church in the next city that knew a church in Germany, and I knew an Orthodox priest that is organizing trips in Italy with buses, So I had to call him. I knew that someone will help me in that particular thing. So in just a week, it was created. You can say out of nothing. It was created a network all over the Europe with the churches. So we made sure that every refugees that came to Brăila, that came to our church, will go, for example, in Spain. But in order to get there, he will go through some churches and be helped by those churches to get there. And we were in connection with them all the time, especially because after a few days, there were ill-intended people at the border, people that wanted to take advantage of young women and kids, and unfortunately, we had that in Ukraine, we had that in Romania, in Moldova, and Poland. So we were very careful, and we try to protect not only here in Brăila, but to protect our guests until they arrive at their destination. So all these churches coming together, and helping us. Actually, what happened is uh, it was the manifestation of the Church of Christ in its purest form, because actually this is what's really all about, and this is a lesson for us when the war will stop and the crisis will stop, that we need to continue this. This should be the normal, and it shouldn't be a surprise. It's a surprise because we did a bad job before the war, and we had to do this and to continue this. And I was telling my our congregation that if a church of Christ doesn't have a voice during the war, it shouldn't open its mouth after the war, because it doesn't have any right to do that. And I think that most of the churches, local churches, understood that, and this is where this partnership and strong fellowship and brotherhood came up. It wasn't something invented by us. It was something that Jesus put in the heart of the church, and how it should react and should behave even in normal times.
It's a beautiful thing, and when you think about Scripture, when you think about how the original message of God and of Christ was spread, it was in some ways the same way. It was going from town to town to town to town, and then if it ever stalled out, we noticed that God created, there was always some sort of displacement that would make people move again, so they wouldn't stay idle and become, oh, well, we're comfortable now, so we're just going to all stay right here. No, that's not how the gospel spreads. It spreads by, men and women taking it and bringing it to people, bringing the bread of life to people who desperately need it. And that was a beautiful thing that you just said, in that this should continue. This should be the norm. This shouldn't be the, crisis mode. This should be how the church operates globally. Um, we help our brothers and sisters in Africa, our brothers and sisters in Asia, wherever they're at. We're the church. The one thing that Christ left for us, the church, that's who we are. And I think that's very, very powerful. Well, speaking of churches, let me. I know it's getting late there, and so I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I do want to talk to you just real quickly about uh, how people can get involved and how people can help. Obviously, we have a lot of places people can donate to and things like that, which is so important. I've talked about that several times on this podcast that the smallest gift can mean a major impact, right? It takes all of us coming together, just like you guys are coming together to help people get from point A to point B and to share the gospel with them. The smallest impact can make a difference. And there's a lot of big churches that work with a lot of big organizations here in the United States, but then there are some smaller churches, who don't have the resources necessarily to write a large check or something like that, but they want to get involved, and more importantly, they want to know that whatever little bit they give is going to go make a difference. It's going to help. What would you, if you were sitting in front of a room of pastors of small to mid-sized churches who are saying, Pastor Joshua, how can I get involved? What would you tell them?
Yeah. Well, first of all, because we are after 80 days of war, and of many churches and nonprofits that were involved in receiving the refugees. First of all, I want to thank God for so many pastors and churches in the western part of the world, and I'm talking here Europe and United States, that already sent and helped us so much. Because yeah, we didn't include in our budget for this year, at the beginning, at the last year in December, we didn't include a refugee crisis. So it was so helpful to see even short amount of money coming from these local and faithful brothers in Christ and sister in Christ. It was unbelievable. So thank you for that. The first thing that uh, you can help us with, and you can be involved in it, it's prayer. So this is and it's not something that a Romanian who's not very involved in the war is talking about. When I talk with my colleagues in Ukraine, my friends in Ukraine, this is the first thing that they tell us. We need your prayers, because we believe in a sovereign God. We know our God is sovereign. He's seated enthroned over the flood, and he's still on the same throne during this war. So we need your prayer. We need that, to know that the church of Christ is involved in this, and we need prayer because beyond the financial needs, this is a spiritual war, and I believe that God is using this war in the life of many Ukrainians and many guests, many refugees. He brings them in our churches to hear the gospel, because they are part of His flock, and needs to be part of the church, and the sheep will listen when will it hear the voice of the pastor, and that pastor is Jesus. So I believe that what we are seeing right now, it's a fulfillment of Matthew 28, of the big commission, you know uh, even for even if it's for our own shame sometimes, because the commission was for us to go at the end of the earth. So if we didn't do a good job, God is sending people in our countries to evangelize them and share Christ with them. So we need your prayer. We need your prayer, for the spiritual war. We need your prayer, that God will give us wisdom. We need so much wisdom, because we receive resources, all kind of resources, and we don't want to waste them. We don't want to send them in Ukraine, in places that there is no need. And if you say there are these places in Ukraine where there's no need of them, yes, there are some places where you can just send them and waste them, because nobody will make time, and nobody have the resources to take them to the families. So I heard about big deposits in Ukraine. in the middle of nowhere, and nobody is going there to take uh, to profit of these resources. So we need a lot of wisdom, but also we need financial resources. And my advice for those who want to be involved, to be part of that, is to pray for wisdom also, and just be partners with organizations and local church in your country, that you know them, you trust them, and you know that they have a close connection with a Christian nonprofit in Romania, in Poland, in Moldova, or a Christian local church. That you know their pastor, you know their staff, you know their ministry, you know the reports that they are sending, or pictures, or whatever whatever the feedback is, and um, what I saw and what we did as a local church is, we tried to be honest. And when we had too much, we said to our sponsors, "Thank you, for the next 3 weeks we are covered. Please don't send us, because we don't know if this will end and we'll have money that were intended for this, or if maybe the crisis will continue for months." you know so we need to be very wise in how we organize the resources on a mid-term or long term. So I advise I my advice is to find these local churches, these local Christian nonprofits that are very honest, that are involved, because there are some people who are not involved, but they are saying that they are involved, and uh, they are not using those money or those resources for the crisis. I don't know what they are using for, but we have to be wise in this. So yeah, contact the local churches in your country that you already know, that are part of a partnership um, with us here in Romania or Moldova. And yeah, just ask for feedback, ask for counsel, and I think that God will guide you to send the right amount of resources at the right time for the right people, because we believe God is working like that through His providence.
That is so true, Pastor. And one thing, as we close, I want to just encourage the listeners of the podcast. Pastor talked a lot about praying. Be praying for these pastors, like Pastor Joshua, these other pastors who are, as he just said, seeking wisdom on the best way to help, the best way to deploy his people, his congregation to help, but also pray for them for rest. A lot of these pastors are working literally around the clock, and it's hard to minister when your own cup is empty, right? You have to ministry comes out of the overflow or the abundance of what comes out of our cup. And it's really easy, I know, when you look around and you see a need to just constantly give, and it slowly depletes your cup. And then your ministry becomes a little less, it's harder to get that wisdom. It's harder to see those opportunities. So I would encourage the listeners of the podcast, be praying for these pastors that they're finding supernatural rest, and that the Lord blesses them with people that they can trust, so they can take some time off, so they can go be with their families. Because one of the worst things that could come out of this is stories of families of people who are trying to help, going through a challenging time because they weren't around. And so I would encourage listeners to do that. And as Pastor Joshua just said, you know, find reputable places and give. You can reach out to us here at the podcast. We have a list of places that we have vetted and that we know will make sure that the funds get to where they're supposed to go. If that's something you feel that you want to do. Um, Pastor Joshua, it has been such a privilege and honor to hear from you today. And thank you so much for sincerely everything that you are doing, everything you've done for serving Him. everything that you've done for these guests who you didn't necessarily know were coming over. Um, Thank you so much for loving your congregation so much, to a point where they were ready to step up to the plate. Didn't necessarily know how, but they were willing to step up to the plate and say, "Put me in, coach. I'm ready. I don't know what I'm going to do, but we'll make it happen." So I just want to say thank you for everything you're doing there. And our prayers are definitely going to be with you, your family, the congregation, and of course the people of Ukraine and those who are helping.
Congratulations for this podcast. I really think this is a part of helping the cause and helping the in this time of crisis. And I pray that God will bless you. I know it's not easy for you there to hear all these stories and trying to pray over them and to invite people to be part and help all of this. And I know it's an effort, and we are so happy and grateful for brothers and sisters all around the world like you, who are not ignorant about what is happening in this part of the country. So thank you again.
Of course. Thank you so much and have a great evening.
Thank you. You too, brother.
Sean here. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a like, a follow, and a share. And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast platform, consider giving it 5 stars. I look forward to sharing the next story with you real soon.